The Indus Valley Civilization. If you ever wanted proof that the ancient world could outsmart modern expectations, look at the Indus Valley Civilization. 4,000 years ago, across what's now Pakistan and northwest India, it was thriving while much of the world was still figuring out cities. These people built nearly 1,000 settlements, with planned streets laid out like a modern grid, multi-story brick houses, public baths, even flush-style drains that connected to underground sewers. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, its biggest cities, could each hold over 40,000 people, comparable to early Mesopotamian centers, and they ran without obvious kings, palaces, or wars carved in stone. Their uniform weights and measures suggest a culture obsessed with order. They traded cotton, metals, and jewelry across more than 1,000 miles, even reaching Mesopotamia by sea. And yet, their script, hundreds of tiny symbols, is still undeciphered. We don't even know what they called themselves. Then, around 1900 BCE, the whole system began to unravel. Rivers shifted course, monsoons weakened, farmland dried up. Some settlements flooded, others starved. The population scattered eastward toward the Ganges plains, and the great cities turned to dust. What's incredible is how much vanished. No grand tombs, no war conquest, just silence. But their ideas lived on. Later Indian cultures inherited their focus on cleanliness, trade, and urban life. The Indus story reminds us, greatness can disappear quietly, leaving only bricks, mystery, and questions that still refuse to answer. The Minoan Civilization. If you imagine paradise before disaster, that's the story of the Minoans. About 4,000 years ago, on the island of Crete in the middle of the Aegean Sea, they built one of the world's first great maritime societies. Their capital, Knossos, was a maze of more than 1,000 rooms, brightly painted with bulls, dolphins, and dancers. Art so alive it still pops today. The Minoans traded olive oil, wine, and fine pottery across the Mediterranean. They had paved roads, running water, and what might be Europe's first flush toilets. Women held high social status, religion centered on a mother goddess, and their undeciphered writing, Linear A, remains one of archaeology's great riddles. Then came the fall. Around 1600 BCE, the volcano Thera erupted on nearby Santorini with the force of hundreds of Hiroshima bombs. Ash and tsunamis smashed Crete's ports, darkened skies, and crushed crops. Earthquakes followed, and Mycenaean warriors from mainland Greece may have finished what nature began. Within a few centuries, the Minoan palaces were abandoned, their script forgotten, and their legends transformed into myth. Think Minos and the Labyrinth. Yet, the Minoans planted the seeds of Greek culture, art, trade routes, and engineering ideas that shaped classical civilization. They remind us how even the most dazzling island empire can vanish overnight when earth and sea decide it's time. The Nabataeans of Petra. Hidden in the red canyons of southern Jordan sits Petra, a whole city carved straight out of sandstone cliffs. 2,000 years ago, this was the marvel of the Nabataean Kingdom. Imagine arriving through a narrow gorge only to see rock exploding into temples and tombs hundreds of feet high. The Nabataeans were trading geniuses, controlling routes that carried frankincense, spices, and silk between Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. They turned desert into gold. They engineered complex water systems, dams, tunnels, and cisterns that made city life possible in one of the driest places on Earth. Their language blended Aramaic and Arabic. Their art mixed Greek, Roman, and local design. For a while, their capital glowed at the crossroads of continents. But history moved fast. In 106 CE, Rome annexed their territory. Trade routes shifted to new ports on the Red Sea. Over time, earthquakes shattered Petra's buildings, caravans stopped coming, and wind buried everything under sand. By the Middle Ages, the city had vanished from maps, remembered only in legend until European explorers rediscovered it in the 1800s. Today, Petra stands silent but immortal, a symbol carved by a people who mastered both stone and commerce, then slipped almost completely from memory. The Nabataeans proved you don't need armies to build an empire, just creativity, water, and wisdom in the desert. The Hittite Empire. Imagine a Bronze Age superpower running head-to-head with ancient Egypt and then vanishing almost overnight. That was the Hittite Empire. Emerging in central Anatolia around 1600 BCE, they built a capital at Hattusa, surrounded by walls 6 miles long and gates guarded by lions carved in stone. The Hittites were master innovators. They forged strong iron weapons centuries before others and wrote on clay tablets in 2 languages, keeping archives of treaties, letters, and laws. One tablet even records history's first known peace treaty, the agreement between Pharaoh Ramses II and Hittite king Hattusili III after the Battle of Kadesh. Their empire stretched across modern Turkey and into Syria, controlling vital trade routes. Yet, around 1200 BCE, everything collapsed. Climate shifts, invasions by the mysterious sea peoples, and waves of rebellion tore the Hittite world apart. Hattusa burned. The empire's administration vanished into the dust of Anatolia. When archaeologists rediscovered their ruins in the 20th century, it rewrote Middle Eastern history, proof of a lost civilization that had once rivaled Egypt and Babylonia, but left barely a whisper in later memory. The Hittites remind us that even empires with peace treaties and paperwork can vanish like smoke when nature and chaos strike at once. The Olmec Civilization. Long before the Maya or Aztec, deep in the jungles of southern Mexico, another people carved their legacy into stone. The Olmecs flourished around 1500 BCE, and we know them best for those giant basalt heads, some weighing up to 50 tons, each carved with unique human features, maybe rulers, maybe ballgame heroes. They built the first planned ceremonial centers of Central America, San Lorenzo and La Venta, complete with pyramid-like mounds, plazas, and drainage canals. They traded jade, obsidian, and rubber across hundreds of miles, linking coastal and highland cultures long before anyone else imagined a Mesoamerica. Their mysterious jaguar human symbols, and what may be the earliest form of writing in the New World, earned them the title Mother Culture of later civilizations. Then, around 400 BCE, their cities were abandoned. Rivers may have shifted, or internal unrest broke the system. Volcanoes could also have choked farmland. No one knows exactly, but their artistic style, calendar ideas, and religious symbols passed on to the Maya and others for centuries. The Olmecs show how a civilization can disappear physically, but survive spiritually, its gods, games, and mathematics echoing long after the forests reclaimed their cities. The Clovis Culture. To meet humanity's real pioneers in the Americas, you have to go back more than 13,000 years to the Clovis people. Named after a site in New Mexico where their distinctive fluted spear points were found, they spread across 2 continents, hunting mammoths, mastodons, and giant bison during the last ice age. For decades, they were thought to be the first Americans. Archaeologists discovered thousands of their tools, from Alaska to South America, each precisely chipped from flint and obsidian. That level of skill suggests tight learning networks and maybe even early trade. Then, somewhere around 10,000 BCE, the Clovis toolkits vanish from the record. Theories fly. Climate warming melted glaciers, vast animals went extinct, or new hunter groups and diseases swept in. Some scientists think they merged with these newcomers, quietly evolving into later native cultures. Others see a massive environmental collapse that erased entire ways of life. What's fascinating is how much they achieved without cities or writing, human innovation at its raw edge. The Clovis story is a reminder that the first chapters of America's history aren't lost, they're simply buried under 13,000 years of soil, waiting for another spear point to tell us more. The Cucuteni-Trypillia Culture. Hidden across today's Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania, once stretched one of Europe's first great prehistoric cultures, the Cucuteni-Trypillia. From roughly 5,500 to 2,700 BCE, they built vast settlements, some spanning more than 300 acres with thousands of homes, true proto-cities long before Athens or Rome existed. Their houses were made of wattle and clay, arranged in spirals or rings. Inside, walls were painted red or cream, decorated with swirling geometric art. They fired elegant pottery covered in hypnotic symbols, possibly early writing, possibly spiritual language. Then, one of the strangest customs in archaeology, every few generations they deliberately burned their entire village to ash, perhaps a ritual of renewal, perhaps protection from disease. For 1,500 years, this cyclical life thrived, sustained by farming and detailed craftsmanship. Around 2750 BCE, the pattern ended. Climate changes, deforestation, and pressure from nomadic steppe tribes may have shattered their delicate balance. The giant villages emptied, the symbolic spiral stopped. Yet their legacy lives beneath Eastern Europe, evidence that long before classical civilization, people here already built community, design, and art on a massive, organized scale. The Cucuteni-Trypillia prove that Europe's lost stories run far deeper than the Greeks ever knew. The Khmer Empire's city of Angkor. In the jungles of Cambodia lies Angkor, a city so sprawling that by 1200 CE it may have housed 750,000 people, making it the largest urban area on Earth. The Khmer Empire engineered it from nothing, hydraulic canals, reservoirs, and rice fields stretching for miles. At its heart stood Angkor Wat, a temple complex aligned precisely with the sun and stars, a masterpiece carved from sandstone blocks that alone weigh millions of tons. Under kings like Suryavarman II and Jayavarman VII, the Khmer Empire ruled much of Southeast Asia. They blended Hindu and Buddhist art, built stone faces on towers, and filled libraries with palm leaf records that have long since rotted away. Then, in the 14th and 15th centuries, the water system started to fail. Monsoons grew erratic, canals clogged with silt. Trade moved toward the coast as wars with Siam weakened the empire. By the 1400s, the jungle had begun to swallow its capital. Centuries later, explorers found vine-covered temples glowing like ghosts. Satellite surveys now revealed the grid-like roads still hidden under trees. Angkor's fall wasn't sudden, it was slow suffocation by climate, politics, and neglect. Yet its art and architecture still shape Cambodia's identity, proving that even lost cities can have immortal hearts. The Ancestral Puebloans, or Anasazi. High in the canyons of the American Southwest, a civilization once built cities into cliffsides, stone apartments stacked beneath red rock. The Ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi, thrived from about 200 to 1300 CE across what's now New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah. They engineered complex dwellings like Mesa Verde and Cliff Palace, some with more than 600 rooms. Roads and signal towers linked their settlements across hundreds of miles, and massive kivas, circular underground chambers, served ceremonial life. They mastered dryland farming, channeling scarce rain through check dams and terraces to feed thousands. Then, in the late 1200s, everything changed. Drought gripped the region for decades, cutting corn harvests by half. Evidence of warfare and even cannibalism appears in the archaeological record. By 1300, the cliff homes were deserted. The people migrated south and east, merging into Hopi, Zuni, and Rio Grande Pueblo communities. What outsiders label a collapse was really an adaptation. The culture didn't vanish, it transformed. Today, their descendants still dance, farm, and tell stories rooted in that stone architecture. The Ancestral Puebloans remind us that survival sometimes means walking away before the walls crumble. Before Egypt's pyramids, there was another astonishing civilization, out in what's now the Sahara Desert. Around 6000 BCE, when that desert was still green with lakes and grasses, a group of pastoral peoples settled near Nabta Playa in southern Egypt. They herded cattle, built deep wells, and left behind the world's earliest known astronomical monuments, stone circles and alignments pointing to the summer solstice and the rising of specific stars. This wasn't just wandering herders. They created ceremonial centers laid out with geometric precision, used pottery decorated in complex motifs, and buried both people and cattle with ritual care. Many scholars believe Nabta Playa's priests or astronomers recorded the movements of the heavens 2,000 years before Stonehenge. Then came desertification. Around 3500 BCE, the rain stopped, grasslands died, lakes vanished, and the people migrated east toward the Nile Valley. Some think they became the early villagers who influenced Egypt's first dynasties, the engineers of irrigation, calendar keeping, and sun worship. When sand finally swallowed Nabta Playa, it also preserved its stones, still standing after 7,000 years, silent calendars left by people who mapped the stars long before history officially began. The Mycenaeans. If you know the legends of Agamemnon and Troy, you've heard echoes of the Mycenaean world. Between 1600 and 1100 BCE, these warriors ruled mainland Greece from citadels like Mycenae and Tiryns, guarded by walls so huge ancient Greeks thought giants built them. They mastered bronze weaponry, gold working and writing, Linear B, an early form of Greek decoded only in 1952. The Mycenaeans traded olive oil and pottery as far as Egypt and Anatolia, commanded fleets across the Aegean, and filled their beehive tombs with treasures fit for Homer's kings. Then, around 1200 BCE, the light went out. Earthquakes struck, palaces burned, trade collapsed, and literacy disappeared for centuries. Historians still debate why. Natural disaster, invading sea peoples, or internal rebellion. Whatever the cause, Greece fell into a dark age where even writing vanished. Yet the memory of that age survived in myth, Achilles, Odysseus, and Troy itself. When classical Greece rose centuries later, it built on scattered ruins left by the Mycenaeans. Their story shows how civilizations can die, but their legends become immortal. The Aksumite Kingdom. Across the Horn of Africa, high on Ethiopia's plateaus, stood Aksum, the empire that once controlled Red Sea trade between Rome, India, and Arabia. By the 1st century CE, Aksum was printing its own gold coins, building stone towers taller than a 10-story building, and commanding ports from Eritrea to Yemen. Its capital glittered with granite obelisks weighing hundreds of tons, carved and raised without mortar. Aksum was among the first states to adopt Christianity officially around 330 CE, centuries before Europe's kings did. It sent missionaries, minted crosses on its coins, and ran a literate bureaucracy fluent in Ge'ez script. But from 700 CE onward, shifting trade routes and the rise of Islamic ports on the Red Sea isolated it. Deforestation weakened agriculture, rainfall declined, and royal power fractured. By the 10th century, its influence faded into the highlands, leaving behind mysterious inscriptions and fallen monoliths. Today, Aksum is remembered as the ancestor of Ethiopia's Christian kingdoms and the resting place, according to tradition, of the Ark of the Covenant. Its quiet disappearance reminds us that the world's crossroads can move, but the civilizations built upon them still echo through faith, language, and stone. The Cahokia Mound Builders. Long before Europeans arrived, a massive city rose on the banks of the Mississippi near modern St. Louis. Around 1050 CE, Cahokia became the heart of North America's largest pre-Columbian civilization, home to perhaps 20,000 people, bigger than Paris at the same time. Its centerpiece, Monk's Mound, towers 10 stories high and covers 14 acres. Around it spread plazas, wooden temples, and neighborhoods linked by causeways. Cahokia's people farmed corn intensively, managed irrigation, and traded copper, shells, and mica across vast distances. They built a solar-aligned circle of timber posts, nicknamed Woodhenge, likely used to track solstices and equinoxes. By 1350 CE, though, the city was emptying. Floods, deforestation, and crop failure strained food supplies. Social tension and climate swings finished the job. When Spanish explorers passed through centuries later, Cahokia was already a mystery, its mounds mistaken for natural hills. Archaeology now reveals a complex culture that governed, worshipped, and engineered on a continental scale, all without metal, wheels, or writing. The Cahokians redefine what Native America achieved long before history books began counting. The Rapa Nui of Easter Island. Thousands of miles from any continent, tiny Easter Island was once home to a bold Polynesian people called the Rapa Nui. Arriving around 1200 CE, they built a society that carved nearly 900 colossal moai, stone statues, some over 30 feet tall and 80 tons each, dragged across the island without beasts of burden. The moai stood atop stone platforms watching inland, symbols of ancestral power that unified the population. But the same ambition drained resources. To move the giants, the Rapa Nui cut down trees, eventually nearly every tree on the island. Deforestation wrecked soil, stopped canoes from being built, and triggered famine and conflict. By the time Europeans arrived in 1722, the moai had been toppled and the population reduced to a few thousand. Later slave raids and disease nearly finished them. Yet their descendants remain, rebuilding language and pride from ruins. Modern research suggests the collapse wasn't madness, but survival, adapting after ecological disaster. Rapa Nui teaches that isolation and ingenuity can build wonders, but balance with nature decides whether those wonders endure. The Sanxingdui Civilization. In 1986, farmers in Sichuan Basin dug a pit and found a mystery. Buried for 3,000 years were nearly a ton of bronze, surreal masks with bulging eyes, tusked faces, and a tree of life sculpture 4 meters tall. They belonged to a previously unknown Bronze Age culture, now called Sanxingdui. From about 1200 to 1000 BCE, these people built city walls, cast huge bronze statues beyond anything seen elsewhere, and melted jade with craftsmanship rivaling Shang China. But oddly, their art was utterly different. No written records, no mention in Chinese chronicles. Then their city vanished. Archaeologists suspect an earthquake diverted the river that fed Sanxingdui, forcing survivors to relocate miles away to what became the Jinshi culture. Nature may have erased their capital, but not their lineage. Sanxingdui shows how much of human history still hides underground, a parallel civilization flourishing while the rest of the world never knew it existed. When you stare into those alien-looking bronze masks, you realize civilizations can vanish entirely, yet leave behind faces still staring straight at us across 3 millennia.